Hi everyone, and welcome to a video that I've been working on for the longest time. I need to even look back through what footage I have to work out how I'm going to fit this all together. So I'm going to do lots of waffling here and hopefully be able to cut bits out and splice it all together in some sort of really workable way. So a few months ago I thought, I wonder if I read quickest on my Kindle or whether I read quickest via paperback or indeed hardback books. And I was like, I don't think there's much difference, yet loads of people claim that they read one faster than the other. So I thought I'd do my own little experiment to find out where I stand in all this, which is great, but obviously this only applies to me and not to everyone else. All the same, I had a great time delving into this information. So I discovered 4 books that I own on Kindle that I've also owned as physical copies. There are a few more than that, so I might do a round 2 of this. If you would like a round 2, let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, I thought I'd stick with the 4 because I'd got a system going. So I'd got 2 books that I'd never read before, and then I'd got 2 that were rereads, just so I could kind of combine and look and compare and have even more things to look at that would make interesting statistics. One thing I have always noticed, and I thought might be the case, is that when I start reading a book, the first hour that you read a book is going to be the slowest hour that you read it. And my findings found that for the most part, there are a couple of exceptions. As a result, I wanted to make sure that I did this fairly. So I've read half of them starting with the Kindle, half of them starting with the physical book, and I just change over each hour. And I've got a lot of notes on my findings. As I said, I've been working on this video for quite some time, so I will splice in other footage that I have got from previous months here and there, and hopefully this will help us get a really nice rounded out video rather than me sitting here thinking, right, what did I film? So the first book I tried to track the information of with this was A Dog's Purpose. Hi everyone, have you ever wondered whether you read books quicker on an ebook or a physical book? And if so, does it vary depending upon the book itself and font size? Or does it vary on the time of day? These are all things that I want to look at in this video. So this is going to take me a good few days to film, and I'll probably miss out some options, but my basic plan is to read this book for an hour, see how far I get, pick the same book up on my Kindle, read for an hour, see how far I get, replicate till I finish the book, and then repeat with some other books to really sort of get a feel for how this will actually pan out, because I have no idea. I'm not someone who thinks that I finish books quicker on one or the other, and it tends to vary more book to book. So I'll be really interested to see. I do think that font size has an impact on me, especially if I'm more tired. I probably read smaller fonts slower. So that'll be interesting one for me to check out with this one, as it's not a tiny font, but it's smaller than what I have on my Kindle, for example. So it'll be interesting to check out. But yeah, enough with the intro at this point, and I will get back to you when I've done some reading. And this is a book where I wasn't sure how many hours it was going to take me. Did I write down how many hours Kindle predicted? No, I didn't. Some of them I was looking at the predicted hours and I was like, And I wanted to have an even number of hours for each type. So in most cases, I've only tracked 4 hours of reading with the books, which hasn't covered the last chunk of the book either. So for better or worse, I'm missing those statistics per hour. All except for the final book, Mr. Mercedes, I've only tracked 4 hours for. So A Dog's Purpose, the first hour I did as a physical read. Okay, so I've just completed my first hour, and I'm pleased to say that I read 47 pages. That's a little bit under my average, not by much though. I will say, or at least what I think my average is, I will say that the font's a little bit smaller in this book than what I think an average book would be, so that probably cancels it out a bit too. Along with the fact of I always read a little bit slower at the beginning of the books when I'm still trying to sort of get to grips with it, so I'm not overly surprised. And I think this next Kindle hour will be interesting. It thinks, by the way, that this book will take me about 5 hours and 11 minutes to read. I will end up with an odd number, but like I said, I'm going to be looking at other books as well anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. I need to now look for where I am in this book so I can carry on from the same spot. I will also say that when I finished with this, when the alarm went off, shall I say, my timer, I was towards the bottom of a page. So what I did was I read to the bottom of that page and then counted that page, and that's how I'll work it with all the books going forward. It's just so that I've got a way of kind of deciding how that's going to work, because you're not always going to be at the exact beginning of a new page when the timer goes off, and probably almost never. So yeah, that's my plan. I'm going to go and read another hour of this, but on my Kindle. And I read 47 pages that hour. That was the least amount of pages for that book. And I'm not surprised, like I said, I tend to read the first hour the slowest because you're still getting used to the characters and the situation and the story and the plot, etc, etc. The second hour on my Kindle, wow, so it suddenly got dark pretty quick while I was doing that second hour reading on my Kindle. But I have just completed it, and I just wanted to come in with an update and say that I read 60 pages that hour on my Kindle, which is a difference of 13 pages, which sounds a lot, but it's not really when you consider that the first few pages when I was reading it initially, I was getting kind of settled into the book, and so I know for a fact I read those slower. I think it'll be more interesting to look at these page differences as we go further across my experiment. But yeah, so far we can't really distinguish anything from this, so I will update you when I've finished the book. I read 60 pages. Then I swapped back to physical and read 67 pages. And then I swapped back to Kindle and I read 68 pages. I'm going to give you all the final stats at the very end, so stay tuned to the end if you want to see exactly how this all breaks down, or add them up as you go along if you're too impatient. That was leaving me a bit unsure on where to go, but after that I thought I'd go for a reread, because it'd be interesting to see whether you still have the same, whether the first hour would be the slowest with a reread, for example. It has been a while since I last filmed for this vlog, but I found it's time to now move on to the next part of the experiment. To even this out, my next read, I'm going to start on my Kindle first, and I'm going to read The Secret Dream World of a Shopaholic by Sophie Kinsella, because I own these in paperback and on Kindle. I will be interested to see whether this gets affected by the fact of it's a reread. So I don't know whether I will end up reading this slower, because I'm already orientated with the characters and the world and everything else. And indeed, I've read it quite a few times. It's not like it'd be the first time I've reread it. I've not reread it for a few years though, so there is that. But yes, I'm curious. If it turns out that there's no difference, then I might have to try and find something else that I own a physical copy of and a Kindle copy of, because my plan actually originally was to work my way through the Shopaholic books and compare each time. So part of me really hopes that I do see a drop in the beginning of this on my Kindle speed, because otherwise I don't know what else I own a physical copy of and a Kindle copy of, where I actually know where the physical copy is, due to moving into my parents and a lot of my books being boxed up ready to move into our new house later this year. Yeah, well, I guess I'll know better once I've read this book, so I'll update you when I have actually read this one and have more stats to compare. So I picked up the first Shopaholic book. The first hour I read on Kindle, and I read 70 pages. This is not the least amount of pages per hour, interestingly enough. So it does go to show that with a reread, because you are more familiar with the plot, the story, the characters, etc, etc, your first hour won't necessarily be the slowest. In fact, it probably comes more down to tiredness or whether there's other distractions going on. I have made notes with these as to whether I was reading, for example, very late at night. One of the times I was, and that was the lowest page count. Another one, I'd got distractions going on, which will feature in a 24-hour readathon vlog, which I'll have coming up very soon. You'll get to learn more about the distraction. So needless to say, that had an effect, but I spread the distraction reading out across both formats, so I think it's still relatively fair. So yeah, the first hour, Kindle, 70 pages. The second hour was physical, and that was 75 pages. The third hour on my Kindle, which was very late and distracted, was 62 pages. And the final hour for this book was the physical copy, 64 pages, again with distractions. So not much to sort of compare there either. From there, I jumped into the second Shopaholic book for another reread, but started reading with the physical copy rather than the Kindle copy, just so that I had got both formats in both orders, if you're following me. So the first hour was the physical copy, and that was 72 pages. Worth noting, this was not my least amount of pages within the hour. So again, the reread emphasising the point that I'd found with the previous one, again, of it not mattering when it's a reread. So the second hour was on my Kindle. I read 80 pages. The third hour, I read the physical copy. That was 75 pages. And the fourth hour, I read on Kindle, and that was 69 pages. Now, the last 2 hours of that, I was probably getting a little bit tired because I've been doing a lot of reading all in one go, which will again get explained via that readathon, as it was quite a spur of the moment thing. So yeah, I don't know whether that had an impact. I tried to allow for it as much as I possibly could and just carried on balancing out my reading, but yeah. So then after that, I had quite a break from working on this video actually. I went through a massive reading slump. And then we moved on to Mr. Mercedes. This one, my Kindle predicted would take me 8 hours to read. I looked at it and thought, knowing the font size, knowing my own reading, that it would take longer than 8 hours. So I committed to track more hours with this one from the get-go, and I actually tracked 8 hours of reading for this particular book. It took me about 10 hours, no, about 9.5 hours to read it all in total, so I couldn't quite get an even number of a further hour each to track, which was a shame, because it'd be nice to track the end of a book just to see what my reading speed is like there, because I bet it really picks up. All the same, I was able to get some splendid footage for this one reading outside, I think. I also managed to do a lot of tracking with the page numbers and got, again, some more results. So the first hour on my Kindle, I read 38 pages. This, interestingly enough, wasn't the lowest amount, but it wasn't by much, and I think it might have been broken up by the way the chapters were laid out. Perhaps that might have added a page or two on, because I don't know, maybe the intro was actually quite interesting and easy to get into. I don't remember anymore. But it definitely was a step down from the other books that I'd been reading at the rates I'd been reading them at. This being because it's Stephen King, it's definitely the most difficult book I tried to pick up during this. Not that Stephen King is difficult to read, but just that I had to concentrate a lot more than what I did, for example, on my contemporary Sophie Kinsella books. So yeah, the first hour of Kindle was 38. The second hour of physical books, of the physical book, I read 36 pages. Then the third hour on my Kindle, I read 34 pages. The fourth hour was the physical copy, and I read 39. Hour 5 was the Kindle copy with 36. Hour 6 was the physical copy with 43. Hour 7 was the Kindle copy with 44. And the final hour was the physical copy, which was 51, which was the most I read, which, as I said, was about an hour and a half away from the end of the book. So, in fact, it would be about where the bookmark was, because I read the rest of it from there on the Kindle. So, I'm thinking that your pace does indeed pick up towards the end of the book, and I might just do a video at some point where I track my reading pace through an entire book. That could be quite interesting, but it's also quite stressful tracking your reading each hour, setting a timer. It takes something away from the books as well, I think. So let me know if it's something you'd like to see, and I'll consider doing it. That said then, with all that footage we have been through, with all those stats we have been through, I want to look at these final totals. So I'll do each individual book's totals. I'll then tell you the grand totals so that you can know whether I read faster on a Kindle or a physical book. So, A Dog's Purpose. Kindle was totaled at 128 pages. The physical copy was totaled at 114 pages. That's a win for the Kindle. But, interestingly, A Dog's Purpose is a book that I started reading the physical copy of for the first hour. So I thought I'd track that statistic just to keep an eye out, and I found that each time, whichever one was the one I'd started with, was the one that was the lowest number. That first hour of reading makes quite the difference. And I'm wondering whether I should also do a version of this experiment where I perhaps don't track the reading of the first couple of hours until I'm into the story, and then track the page count and see what I get from that. So the Shopaholic book, the first one, the Kindle was the starting one and I read 132 pages. The physical copy won with 139 pages. The second Shopaholic book I did the other way around, and so the physical copy is the one I started with and I read 147 pages. The Kindle copy came out at 149 pages. That is the least amount of difference between the two, which I thought was really interesting, especially since you don't get with the Shopaholic ones quite so much of the slowness in the first hour of reading because it's a story I'm already familiar with. So that was quite interesting to see, and that perhaps is the one that makes me think I read both at exactly the same speed, and the other variances probably have a slight effect. But all the same, we will look to Mr. Mercedes totals as well. And the type I started with there is Kindle. I read 152 pages. With the physical copy, I read 169 pages. That was a big win for the physical one. So where does this leave our grand totals? Well, the Kindle grand total was 561 pages. The physical copy grand total was 569 pages. This is a discrepancy of 8 pages. Now, I don't want to be the one to say that everyone would be the same, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people who think that they read one quicker than the other perhaps actually don't, and they'd probably find very similar statistics between the two. I would love to know whether you've ever done an experiment like this yourself, to see whether you have a similar experience, or maybe this has made you want to go and do the experiment for yourself so you can find out whether you have the same results or not. I'd love to know. This has been a big project. I've been working on this for months. I've found it quite stressful at times because it's kind of put me off my reading a bit at times, but at the same time it's been so much fun and I've really enjoyed making this video. So if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe by clicking the image of me if you want to see more book reviews and other bookish content from me, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.